Uh-oh.
All right, so we've been doing some more work on the board, getting these leads all kind of attached and cut to close lengths. So I mounted a couple of standoffs inside the chassis to hold the chassis, to rather hold the board into the chassis in position. It also makes it easier to work on, as the board is now sort of in there kind of rigid, and I can wind the wires around the turrets and do my soldering, and it's a little bit easier, right? So I'm just about, pretty close to being finished. I'm kind of working right now on the bias supply over here. All right, so I'm going to be putting in a little bit of bus wire here around the ground side of the capacitors that are used for the bias supply right there. And I'm using just some solid core wire, right? Which is, I just take the insulation off of and run around. I mean, you can buy bus wire too. I have some, but I'm saving it for some more of the ground plane on the back of the potentiometers, right? So this is sort of where our bias is, right? So we have our capacitors. Actually, we needed to do, see, when I'm talking a lot of times, I don't really pay attention. Let me redo this. We have to also connect that one resistor there. So we got this around to there, and then it goes around to here. All right, that's correct. So it used to be, well, when I was wiring up amps in the shop at Three Monkeys, if I was talking on the phone with somebody, the odds, we used to also bet on whether what I finished was going to work straight up. And I'd be talking on the phone. I wasn't using a diagram. I was just kind of, wiring from memory sort of deal. And if I was talking on the phone a lot, there was the bet that I was going to have the amplifier work right off the bat went down a little bit. And I can sort of see why. I'm not one of the people that can do, a lot of different things all at the same time. I just don't work that way. I need to really kind of be in a quiet kind of position to get things where I want them. All right, so I'm just going to run a few more leads while we're just talking here. So you can sort of see I'm running some of these ground leads here. All right, so I'm going to press this down. Okay. All right. Bring this through. Twist it around. All right. There we go. So this is the ground for the capacitors, for the B- for the bias supply. All right. And everything on these is run to a single point on the bus for the potentiometers over there. So that's sort of what how we're gonna run those right now. Straight over to that place. Well, actually, if I remember correctly, this should be between the bass and the treble. It should be like right around here is where they would go. All right, so that's how long this lead is. And then we have this ground over here for the first stage's cathode, first tube's cathode, resistors and capacitors, right here. Okay, bring that around like so. Kind of gonna put this on. And then we're just going to start to populate the board in a couple of seconds here, and then it'll start making a little more sense probably when you're looking at this as to why, where everything is. What exactly is that turret doing? What's that one for? That kind of stuff. So these all are going to go somewhere around here, so that's probably long enough right at this point. So I'm going to put this back over here. All right, so our wires are basically paid out. I had to add a little turret here. As I was on a Jose, there's actually a break between the cathode and then the rest of the circuit, right? So you have the master volume section located right here, and then it feeds back to this point here, which is the slope resistor, treble capacitor, slope resistor, and your two 0.02 capacitors, right? So I added that turret in. I did actually remove these that we did in the last video because these should be, well, I'm going to run them on top, like the Jose did as well. And they could be shielded as well. So we're going to look into that, maybe shielding it up. We're also going to add like a section here of a little solder, little tab, right, where we can build the circuit for this first stage's preamp tube, right? We're going to put a cathode resistor on there, plate resistor, a plate capacitor, all that good stuff. So let's start with the with putting stuff in there, right? And I'll show you sort of how I like to do it. And so this I'll use for resistors. It's, you know what, it's kind of a funny story, maybe kind of funny too. So it's a long time ago. This is probably going on like almost 20 years maybe, or so, just under 20 years ago. My business partner Greg at Three Monkeys was working for Jason White and on Green Day, doing the guitar teching there, and they were in New York, and I was living up in New York, and I went over to Giant Stadium to the sound check to work on some amplifiers over there and drop an amp off. And I was doing a repair, I think too, on one of the Marshalls, and Greg was there, and then Hans, who was or still is Billy Joe's tech, were sitting back, you know, doing their work, getting everything set up. And I set up near them and opened up the amp and laid it on its, laid it open. Was looking in there and needed to replace some parts, and I had, resistors and capacitors. So they're kind of like walked over, and I pulled out this thing, and I'm taking it out, and I'm like measuring, right? And they're like looking at me like I'm crazy, right? Which actually I'm used to. I'm used to people looking at me like I'm nuts, and they're like, well, why? What the hell is he doing? I mean, this guy's like, does he think we're that dumb? That he's, what is measuring this going to do? And so when it kind of all made sense when I grabbed the resistor out of the box, right, that I had with me, and I took this thing, right, and used it to bend the leads of something to the appropriate distance so that they would fit in like that and look nice, right? So this is kind of cool. I mean, they do sell these like triangles that have places incrementally for how long you want the resistor and wire lead to go before it breaks at 90 degrees to fit in your board. But those are confusing because you always miss, like, which one was it again? Was it this one or this one? Because there's like 25 of them and they're about 1/4 inch apart. So it gets goofy. So this allows me just to measure in any resistor, or rather any distance I want between standoffs or eyelets, turrets, whatever you want to call them, and bend the lead nice and neat, right? So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. The other thing I like to do when I'm doing this too, I'm sure a lot of people do this as well, but sometimes the resistors and capacitors, they sit around for a while and they get a little bit of oxidation on the leads, and sometimes they're a little bit bent. So I'll just use my needle nose, and they're smooth, right? This isn't like a sort of a serrated needle nose. It's just like really kind of smooth metal. So I'll use it like this, and I'll just kind of pull on it and scrape a little bit of the metal off. Not hard. You don't want to, you know, risk damaging the component, right? And you can sort of flatten it out as well a little bit and straighten it out and remove any oxidation so you get good solder bite. There's a new word, solder bite, on the component itself. All right, so that's cool. The other thing I like to do is in terms of order, right? I like to do the ones that are smaller first, right? The ones that are sort of inside first. It's easier, like for instance, in this area of the phase inverter, it's easier to get these ones in, right? Before you put in these ones, because these kind of get in the way then when you're going to go. So that's some useless advice or useful advice, depending on how you want to look at it. And you can also mount this like on your bench hanging off the side. You can't really see it, but it would be like if this was the end of your table, you could just mount it there and use a C-clamp to just hold it in place, and then you got a handy little bending area right there. And you could just go like mad through bending everything out. All right, so let me start populating the board here, and we will return shortly. All right, so we got all of the board sort of built. Just a couple of little last things to shove in there, but I figured give you a update on what we've got here. We're going to put in the feedback resistor, obviously the 100K there. We're also going to drill some holes here for paying out the ground lead, as well as the high volt right on the anode of the rectifier. But all in all, it went together pretty smoothly. Actually, no problems at all. So, you know, what would be some advice if you're going to be doing this like for the first time or what have you? You just got to kind of take your time. Measure your components, right, when you're building. Make sure that your components are within the tolerances that they should be. You know, very rarely are you going to find something that's wrong with the resistor. You know, if you're testing your resistors or whatever before you're putting them in, more likely you're going to find that you put like a 10K where 100K should be, because, you know, you sort of looked at the color code and really quickly and you didn't quite see it correctly. So it's a good idea to have, like, you know, your meter handy, and you just double check everything as you're putting it in, and then you'll know if you've got, you know, a resistor that's bad, which is extraordinarily rare, or more likely you've sort of put a resistor, or you've grabbed the wrong one out of the pile, right? Because the color coding sometimes, you know, yellow can look like orange from the right angle, or black can look like brown, or, you know, green sometimes will look a little dark. So that's sort of like the issue there. So we set up the board as per the Jose, right? So we have the sort of split cathodes for V1, 0.02, 0.002, right? So it's sort of like the super lead spec, the 0.68 across the cathode follower, 500 puff treble cap and bypass cap on the mixers, 0.02s here in the tone stack. Pretty similar 0.02s on the phase inverter. So super lead spec, 100K feedback resistor, right? I think that's that's about all you really need to know about, you know, this particular build. And then obviously there's a surrogate preamp stage. But if you want to get more in depth as to what this amplifier, the original Jose, is like, there is a video on my channel, a series where I kind of go through and document the amp that this is being based on. So I think we're in a good spot right now to just basically start mounting stuff in the chassis, right? Transformers, sockets, all those things, right? Potentiometers, start doing some basic wiring of the power supply, and then we can drop the board in. So when we return next, we will be putting together the chassis itself, putting all that stuff, mounting it all on there. So again, thanks for watching. And once again, don't forget to check out 3 Monkey Solderless, right? Home of the world's best audio cables for your pedal board. For DC, AC, and we even have RCA cables too, if you got like a cool car stereo or home stereo you want to go solderless with, or components. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.